It's Little Bird and Jesus.
Bible stories for bedtime.
And car time. And playtime.
And anytime you want to hear how much Jesus loves you in all this world.
Even little birds.
Hi, I'm Pastor Sarah at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. Welcome to this podcast where we tell stories told just for kids, and kids at heart. We're here together to learn about Jesus and his friend Little Bird as they have all kinds of adventures and meet all kinds of amazing people. A happy day to all of you. I hope you're doing great. We've got a fun story today about one of the lessons Jesus taught, one that's hard to figure out, but hopefully Little Bird and her friend Tiny Mouse will be able to help us out. So get that imagination ready for today's story, Season 3, Episode 15, Little Bird and Jesus and the Rich Young Man. One beautiful sunny morning, Jesus walked out in the courtyard of his house and said to Little Bird, "My friends are meeting me outside. We're heading out to share some more of God's love with the world. Do you want to come?" Little Bird nodded. Of course she wanted to go. She loved these adventures. She heard some of Jesus' friends outside, eager to get moving, and when they joined them, Andrew said to Jesus, "Hey Jesus, good morning. I woke up super early today. Do you know when the ducks woke up?" Jesus smiled. He knew what was coming. "No, Andrew. When do the ducks wake up?" Andrew said, "At the quack of dawn." They all laughed. Philip said, "Well, do you know what the camel said to his best friend?" They all shook their heads. And Philip said, "I'll never desert you. I'll never desert you." They all kinda laughed. And Thomas said, "Well, I've got a better camel joke. Why wasn't the camel ever hungry, even though he was always in the desert?" "Well, it's because of all the sandwiches there." They all laughed, and they started to head down the road. But as the disciples of Jesus walked, a young man ran up to Jesus. He had very nice robes on, made with beautiful purple threads that were so clean. His sandals were shiny and fancy. Little Bird knew this young man must be rich. But the young man knelt right in front of Jesus with such respect and honor, and he said, "Good teacher, what do I have to do to make sure God will love me forever? What do I need to do so that I'll live with God now and in heaven someday too?" All the disciples stopped joking and laughing, and they listened. They too were asking this very same question. Jesus answered him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good, truly good, except for God alone. But you know, I'm sure you do, what God wants us to do. The 10 Commandments you've known so long." And the young man nodded. "Yes, I know them. Don't murder, don't steal, love God, don't lie, don't cheat, honor your parents, keep the Sabbath day. I know all these rules. I've been such a good person since I was little, trying to follow all these rules. I do them all." When he said this, he looked up at Jesus, and Jesus looked down at the young man. Little Bird watched, and she saw such love in Jesus' face. Jesus loved this man so much, cared so much for him, had such compassion for him. And Jesus said, "Well, there's one thing left for you to do. Sell everything you have and give the money to the poor. Then the only treasure you will have will be the treasures of God. Then come and follow me." The man dropped his head. His eyes were filled with tears. "Everything?" he asked, and Jesus nodded. "Everything. Sell everything I have? But I have so much." The young man stood up and began to walk slowly away. It's hard to let go when you are holding on to so much. The disciples, who had only moments before been laughing, were suddenly sad and quiet. They realized the difficulty of following Jesus. Jesus turned to his friends and said, "It is so hard for people who have a lot to enter the kingdom of heaven. You can't imagine how difficult it is." Jesus thought for a minute and said, "You were just talking about camels. I think it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who has so many possessions to understand and to participate in God's great dream of love for the world." Little Bird thought about a huge camel, the biggest animal she'd ever seen. And then she thought about the eye of a needle, something so small. There's no way a camel could ever go through the eye of a needle. It was all so confusing. Jesus seemed to draw all kinds of people into God's goodness. What made it so hard for people who had a lot? As they started to walk, Little Bird asked Jesus, "What do you mean by that camel story, Jesus?" Jesus thought about this and said, "Little Bird, do you remember when Tiny Mouse found that grape?" Little Bird did remember. It all started one day when Tiny Mouse and Little Bird were out exploring the neighborhood. Tiny Mouse was sniffing around for some food. He loved food, couldn't get enough. He was always eating and eating and eating, and he especially loved fruit. Well, that day, as he sniffed around, he noticed something purple caught under a pile of rocks. He said, "Ooh, Little Bird, there's a grape stuck under those pebbles. It looks so yummy. It smells so good. I want to eat it. Can you help me?" Little Bird tried to move the rocks, and even though they weren't big by human standards, they were much too big for a little sparrow to move. But Tiny Mouse realized that there were some cracks that made a little hole where he could just barely squeeze his little mouse arm and grab the purple grape. "I got it!" Tiny Mouse said. "I'm holding on to it. It smells so good. I can't wait to eat it." Tiny Mouse tried to pull his hand out while holding on to the grape, but it was stuck. The grape was too big for the hole. "Help!" Tiny Mouse screamed. "Help me, I'm stuck!" He tried and he tried to pull the grape out of the crack between the rocks, but the grape was too big and the hole was too small. He pulled and he pulled at the grape and it just wouldn't budge. Finally, Tiny Mouse called up, scared and sad, "Little Bird, I'm going to be stuck here forever." Little Bird flew over and said, "Tiny Mouse, if you just let go of that grape, you can get your hand out through the cracks, just like you put it in." But Tiny Mouse shook his head. "No, that grape is perfect. I can smell how yummy it will be. I won't let go of it." Tiny Mouse started to cry. "If I let go, I can have my hand, but then I will lose my grape. I'm stuck here forever." Little Bird didn't know what to do, but eventually she convinced Tiny Mouse to just let go of the grape. She said, "You can't even eat that grape if your hand is stuck there. Just let it go. Come play with me, tiny mouse. We'll have some fun. Surely Mary set out something good for us to eat." And weeks later, this was the story that Jesus shared with his friend and with Little Bird. And he said, like Tiny Mouse and his grapes, sometimes people can't let go of their stuff, their riches, and it keeps them from really loving, from really living. The disciples listened, and they realized that they, like Tiny Mouse, and like that rich young man, all had something they held on to that kept them from really loving God and really loving others as much as they could. Philip asked, "So Jesus, who can be saved? Who can really do any of this? Who can really understand and truly live your great dream of love for the world?" And Jesus looked at them too and loved them and said, "For people, it's impossible, but not for God. For God, all things are possible. Alone, you would never be able to do it, but together with God, it can definitely, it will definitely happen." And so they kept on walking and talking about the hard way of following Jesus. They talked about how much more fun it is to share than to keep something for themselves. They talked about how they depended on other people, giving them food and care and love, and how they wanted to be people who did those generous things too. They talked about how much they received when they gave things away, friendship and joy and meaning and care. Sometime in the middle of all of it, Andrew said, "Hey, why did the shrimp refuse to share his treasure?" The disciples all shrugged. They had no idea. Andrew said, "Because he was a little shellfish." And they laughed together. And Little Bird knew that this bunch of friends, with Jesus in their lead, was the best treasure anyone could ever have. Friends, I hope you liked our story today and all those ridiculous jokes. Maybe you have some of your own jokes you love to tell. If you have any, please share them with us along with some help with our sound effects. We'd love to hear them. And maybe we can include your jokes in an upcoming episode too. Maybe this week you can find a needle and look to see how small the hole is, or the eye of that needle. Or if you want, try to reenact the silly story of Tiny Mouse and his grape. Find a piece of cardboard and have a grown-up help you cut a small hole in it, not too big, just big enough for you to fit your hand through it. Then on the other side, have a stuffed animal or something else big that you love, and try to pull your hand through without letting go. It's impossible, right? Or maybe just as an experiment, hold on to one or two of your favorite toys with both hands and try to help with some chores, or to play a game you love, or to give your sibling a hug. It's impossible, isn't it, when your hands are full? Sometimes we have to let go of our stuff to love other people or to be loved. Today's story invites us to be generous people and to share what we have. It reminds us that the most important things in our lives aren't our stuff. The real treasures are people and love. The most important things are the people around us and our faith. Sometimes all kinds of other things get in the way of loving people. And the good news is that Jesus can help us, even when it's hard, even impossible to share. And even better, Jesus will keep on loving us, no matter what. Thanks for listening to Little Bird and Jesus. Have a wonderful day.
Now flap your little wings.
Sing a little song.
And remember that to Jesus,
You will always belong.
Thanks for listening to Little Bird and Jesus. a podcast of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. For more information on St. Paul, visit us at stpaulqc.org. Come visit us again next week as Little Bird continues her journey.